In this video, I'm going to get you started with the Gradebook in Moodle 3.5. Now, there are so many different ways that you may choose to use a gradebook and how you grade materials in your class and allocate out point values and do calculations and things, that it's really difficult to show every possible option inside of the gradebook, but I can at least point you in the right direction on how to get started in setting up a gradebook and show you some potential pitfalls in the gradebook in Moodle. So first of all, to set up your gradebook, you come over here to the administration block in the course administration tools and you click on Gradebook Setup. This is how you access the gradebook even after you've already set it up if you just want to enter grades or look at grades, but it says Gradebook Setup. And it brings us to the gradebook interface. We are in the setup area. If we wanted to look at grades, we'd go to the view. If we wanted to set some scales, assign numeric values to letter grades, import or export grades, we would use one of the other tabs. Here inside of setups, we have the basic setup as well as some settings and some preferences for your report as you enter grades. What you see here is the course name is at the very top, and there are some things that we can edit related to the gradebook for the entire course, and then we have the course total at the very bottom. Everything we place as we add it in will live inside of here. This is simply your setup. It's not going to look like a gradebook, it's not going to feel like a gradebook, it's just setting up and assigning values to the items that you've placed, the columns that will end up in the gradebook. The first choice you have to make is whether or not you are going to be assigning a value to each grade that is weighted. That is, a more common way to think of it is the percent that it's worth. So perhaps all the quizzes are worth 10%, and exam 1 is worth 15%, and paper 2 is worth 10%, and so on. If you use percents like that, you're going to want to make sure you have weights in here. If you do not see a column that says weights, you need to tell Moodle you want to do weights, and I believe that you will see that by default in our Moodle setup. But if not, this is a setting that affects the entire gradebook, so we come to the edit to the right of the name of the entire gradebook, so edit settings. And this is called the aggregation method. Weighted mean of grades means there's a place to put in percents. Simple weighted, and I really wish they didn't use the word weighted there and just said simple mean of grades, because that's what it really is. That's when there are no weights, when everything is worth the same relative to each other. Ignore this mean of grades with extra credit. You're going to think that makes it a great way to put in things with extra credits, but it really doesn't. It just allows you to exceed the maximum grade that you've set for an item. Natural, this is the one that confuses people a lot. That word natural doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What it means is add up points. It's a sum of points methods. So for instance, test 1 may be worth 10 points, and test 2 you're grading that out of 15 points, and paper 1 you're grading out of 5 points. And in the end, they all add up to 273 points. And then you'll see this student made 250 out of 273 points. That's what the natural method of aggregation means. I'm just going to leave it at weighted mean of grades like we have it. Other things I could do here is grade type, leave that alone, because value just means we're working with numbers. And this will automatically gray itself out if you choose the natural approach, because the maximum grade for the whole gradebook is going to vary depending on your points. But otherwise, the default at 100 makes the most sense. But I didn't change anything, so I'll just hit cancel. All right, so that is how you deal with having a weights area. Now you've got categories and items. The items are columns in your gradebook, and categories are ways to distinguish clumps of columns as belonging together. Sometimes you'll do that just for organizational purposes. Sometimes you'll do that because you want to be able to control those grades separately from the other grades. So for instance, maybe you have a category of quizzes and you grade all your quizzes out of 10 points, but everything else in the gradebook is graded out of 100. You'd create a category so that you can kind of keep those distinct and place a maximum grade for that category at 10, and that will allow Moodle to continue to calculate correctly. Perhaps you've got a number of homeworks and you want to be able to drop the lowest grade. In order to do that, they have to live inside of a category so that you can, and I just clicked on that, so we'll name this homework. And in this case, I'm going to say all my homeworks are worth the same relative to each other, so I'm going to leave that as simple. And I'm going to click on show more, and I'm going to say drop the lowest. Actually, I tend to prefer to say keep the highest, although drop the lowest sometimes makes more sense. The reason for that is if you say drop the lowest, then when you've only put in one homework grade, that one gets dropped. When you've put in two homework grades, and so until you put in 2 or 3 homework grades, the grade looks a little weird. Saying keep the highest and setting that at what I expect it to be. So let's say we might do 13 homeworks in the end, but I'm going to only keep the highest 10. Then for the first 10 weeks, all 10 of those are being kept. It's not until you move into week 11 that sort of not counting one of them kicks in. That sometimes works a little better to keep your students, with a more accurate view of where their grade is going at that point. And at that point, their grade in that category can only get a little bit better, as opposed to doing the drop the lowest where who knows where it's going to go. But this is up to you and how you choose to grade. So I'm going to change that to keep the highest 10. Exclude empty grades. If a grade is not entered, Moodle does not count it in the average. So again, let's say they've got 4 quizzes and they skipped quiz number 2. Their grade is only being averaged out of quizzes 1, 3, and 4. So they add those up, divide by 3 instead of by 4. So if you choose exclude empty grades, you do need to remember to put zeros in when zeros are warranted. The reason to leave that checked and exclude empty grades is at the beginning of the semester, if you didn't, all of that stuff they haven't done yet gets counted as zeros, and it looks like their grade, I'm making a 17 in this class, kind of a thing. How can I be making a 17 if I've made a 95 on both the things I've turned in? So you get a lot of questions from students when you don't choose to exclude empty grades. Category total, maximum grade. Maximum grade either needs to be what every item in the gradebook is graded out of. So if every item in that category is not gradebook, but category, every item in that category is graded out of 10, great, set it to 10. If they're graded out of variable scores, or you're otherwise not certain, put it at 100, because one way or another, that always works. It essentially turns it into a percentage if you used scores, a variety of scores other than 100. Doesn't always make a lot of sense, but just trust me. If every item in the category is graded out of the same thing, set your maximum grade to that. If not, set your maximum grade to 100. All right, so that's my category. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now I've got a category. It lives inside the gradebook, so it's indented one, and I see the category and I see the homework total, but I don't have any homeworks in it yet. Another reason why categories can be nice is if you don't really know how many of something you're going to have, you don't have to fiddle with the weights for each individual thing. I just know that across the course of the semester, homeworks are worth 10%, however many shake out. Once I've entered in something into weights, I do want to click on Save, because otherwise that will disappear as I move forward. I'm going to add a grade item now. I'm going to add 2 grade items. One, I'm going to go ahead and do my first homework, homework 1. Value means it's out of a number, and I'm grading out of 100, so that's fine. What category does it live in? Not the name of the course, because that's at the root of the site. I'm going to put it inside my category of homework. That's why it's nice to go ahead and make your categories before you make your items. Save changes. There we go. So living inside the category of homework is homework 1, and so forth. I'm going to add one other grade item, and this will be final exam. And in this case, I don't want it to live inside of a category, so it'll just be in the name of the course. And it's right here at the bottom, and that final exam is worth 15% of the course grade. Save changes. Now, if I need to edit or change things, I come to the edit that's to the far right. That gets me of any given category or item. My options include going back into the settings, perhaps there's something I need to change, deleting it, or hiding it, which is sometimes kind of nice. I often, for example, hide the final course grade for a while into the semester because things are weird until everything's settled out in how I'm doing my gradebook. Or perhaps I'll hide certain other things. One other thing about organizing your gradebook If you use the assignment tool or the quiz tool inside of Moodle, it creates a column in the gradebook automatically. I suggest that if you're going to use categories, you go ahead and make those to start with so that they're available for you to select whenever you do create an assignment or a quiz. It already exists in your settings and you can say, hey, this goes there. This is important to note because otherwise if you create a column here, you do grade item for quizzes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you use the Moodle quiz tool, you're going to have duplicate columns inside your gradebook, which really throws stuff off. The last thing I want to talk about are some common pitfalls in using the gradebook. One of those is not having saved your weights or not having placed weights incorrectly. Always make sure that your weights add up to what you expect them to. Usually we treat this as percentages, so those would add up to 100. It doesn't have to be. I could have 1 and 1.5 there. It's all about their relative value to each other. For inside of a category, if you are choosing to subweigh items, that is, inside of a category, some items might be worth more than others, so you're choosing to have weights. Again, double check and make sure that those are correct at any time. This is a very common mistake I see people do where they have not properly weighted their items. Coming over here to the View button, this allows me to see the gradebook as it stands. There's no students in this site, but otherwise I would see their names there, and then these would look like columns where I could enter the grades in as needed, with a course total here at the end. Just a hint, try to keep, you can have your category titles as long as you want them to be, but try to keep your column names short, because otherwise, if you've got a lot of items, you're going to be in ton of scrolling to get to things. You can edit again here, you can rename, you can edit, you can sort, some things like that. Careful with these buttons. These toggle your ability to only see the totals versus the individual items. If you accidentally click it, it can get really confusing, particularly if you accidentally click that one. It makes it look like you've deleted your gradebook. You haven't, but keep that in mind. Entering grades, again, a little hard to show you in this video, but there's a square, a cell in the gradebook, and you enter a grade. It automatically saves. Although there is often a save button, it's usually grayed out because it's automatically saving quickly enough that it doesn't need you to do that. And that is the very basics of creating and setting up your gradebook in Moodle 3.5.